They tore down my great-grandfather's bridge while I was at his funeral. I was still standing at the graveside, dirt fresh under my fingernails from throwing that last handful of earth onto Ezra Thorne's casket, when my phone buzzed. The video my neighbors sent hit me like a physical blow. First came the sound. Chainsaws screaming through century-old oak as if they were slicing straight through my chest. Then the image. The hand-hewn timber bridge my great-grandfather had built in 1952 collapsing into Clearwater Lake in slow, heartbreaking motion. Planks he had shaped with his own hands, joints he had carved with tools still hanging in my workshop, floated away like broken memories. That bridge wasn't just wood and nails. It was the path where I learned to fish as an 8-year-old boy, worms squirming between my fingers. It was where my father proposed to my mother under a moonlit sky in 1978. 3 generations of Thorns had crossed it to reach our 12-acre island paradise. Now, with the bridge gone, we were prisoners on our own land. No legal road access remained, only by boat, while the Lakeside Estates, HOA's brand-new $4 million luxury resort, gleamed mockingly on the opposite shore. I could almost picture their president, Cordelia Brightwater, standing on the resort deck with a crystal flute of champagne in her manicured hand, smiling with satisfaction. She had finally removed what she called an eyesore. What she didn't know was that she had just pulled the plug on her own empire. My name is Jasper Thorne. At 45, I'm a third-generation boat mechanic who still builds fishing boats by hand. Motor oil stains my fingernails permanently, and my calluses tell the story of every piece of wood I've ever shaped. My great-grandfather Ezra was more than a craftsman. He was a visionary. In 1952, he bought that island for $800 and a handshake when Clearwater Lake was nothing but a quiet fishing hole. He built the cabin, the workshop, and that bridge with his own hands, selecting every timber and carving every joint. The smell of cedar shavings and fresh varnish had been my cologne for as long as I could remember. Then Cordelia arrived 3 years ago, bringing big city money and an attitude that everything needed upgrading. She cruised the lake in her spotless pontoon boat, binoculars in hand, documenting anything that didn't fit her vision of lakeside perfection. Our bridge became her personal obsession. She called it unauthorized, an environmental hazard, even though it had been legally grandfathered long before any zoning laws existed. She stood on the resort deck, taking notes and photos, planning her next move like a general preparing for war. The timing of the demolition was cruelly perfect. Ezra passed peacefully at 96 on a Tuesday night. The funeral was Thursday afternoon, with half the county in attendance to honor a man who had built boats for 3 generations of local fishermen. By Friday dawn, while I was still emotionally drained, the crew arrived, trucks, a bulldozer, chainsaws roaring. They claimed a 48-hour emergency safety notice filed while we grieved. By the time I raced back, it was over. 50 years of family history drifted in pieces down the lake, and Cordelia watched from her deck with a satisfied smile. The isolation hit hardest. My 89-year-old grandmother Dolores could no longer visit Ezra's gravesite. She was too frail for regular boat trips. My workshop suffered without easy deliveries. Property values on the island plummeted. For the first time in 70 years, the Thorne family felt cut off from the community we had helped build. That's when I started noticing the surveyors measuring water depths near where the bridge once stood. When I confronted Cordelia, she smiled thinly and spoke of development opportunities and highest and best use. Something bigger was at play, but I didn't see the full picture yet. The legal harassment began exactly 1 week later. Nuisance complaints about my boat storage, cease and desist letters claiming we were trespassing on fishing spots my great-grandfather had taught me to use. She threatened $5,000 daily fines for any unauthorized watercraft, including my grandmother's pontoon and the rowboat I had built with my own hands. Cordelia wasn't content with cutting us off. She wanted to make us disappear. While she printed violation notices, I dug through dusty boxes in my grandmother's attic. There, tucked between war medals and old wedding dresses, I found a manila envelope labeled Lake Property, Important. Inside were Ezra's original handwritten survey notes and hand-drawn maps. A trip to the county courthouse with the helpful clerk Betty, who remembered my great-grandfather, revealed the real treasure. The 1952 land patent showed that Ezra had purchased not just the island, but the mineral and water rights to the entire lake bed, rights that had never been transferred or sold. Even better, the original deed included a perpetual easement for bridge access that could never be revoked by any HOA. Those rights were still legally mine. Every boat docked at the resort, every swimmer in their beach area, every drop of water their fountain used. They were all on my family's property without permission. I began rebuilding the bridge using Ezra's original 1952 blueprints. The sound of my hammer ringing across the lake felt like a battle cry. Cordelia responded with a sheriff's deputy and accusations of environmental destruction. She filmed me for social media, calling it eco-terrorism. What she didn't know was that I had been filming every interaction too. Quietly, I filed paperwork to formally record my water rights and easement. That filing also allowed me to charge rent for use of the lake bed. The resort's entire operation suddenly rested on land I legally owned. Cordelia had brought a laminated rulebook to a legal gunfight. Her social media campaign escalated quickly. Petitions, rumors that I ran an illegal business, a newspaper hit piece. She pushed for new zoning restrictions. But I fought back the old-fashioned way, hosting free boat repair workshops on Saturdays, rebuilding relationships with neighbors over coffee and wrenches. At the Historical Society, I shared family photos and met Marcus Rivera, a retired environmental scientist with 3 years of data showing the resort had caused a 30% drop in dissolved oxygen, a 40% decline in fish populations, and significantly reduced water clarity. The lake had actually been healthier when our modest bridge stood. The town council hearing was packed. Cordelia presented glossy slides about property values and progress. I brought 3 generations of history and hard data. When she lost her temper and called locals hillbillies who lived in the past, the room went silent. She had just insulted half the county. Still, she pressed on with fraudulent liens totaling $12,000 and a lowball offer to buy our property for $50,000. That's when I hired Winston Clearwater, a retired environmental lawyer with a dry sense of humor and 40 years of experience. His investigation revealed the truth. Our family had never joined the HOA. The covenants explicitly protected pre-existing structures, and the emergency demolition order was based on a safety inspection that never happened. The entire justification was built on fraud. We filed a countersuit for $500,000 in damages, plus punitive claims and an injunction. At the next council meeting, I presented the original deeds, the fraudulent documents, and the evidence of HOA overreach. Other families began sharing their own stories of harassment. When Winston mentioned that filing fraudulent liens could be a federal crime, the room erupted. Then came the real bombshell. Winston's deeper dive into the resort's permits showed it had been built on federally protected wetlands with falsified documents. The original permits were for small seasonal cabins. Instead, Cordelia had constructed a year-round luxury resort with 40 suites, a commercial kitchen, and massive docks, operating far beyond permitted capacity and discharging untreated waste. Internal emails proved she had known about the violations from the start. The bridge demolition wasn't just spite, it was an attempt to keep us from discovering and documenting the illegal operation on our own lake bed. We formed a war council around my grandmother's kitchen table. Winston, Marcus with his water testing equipment, Dolores with decades of photographs, and Sage Moonbeam, the local newspaper editor who had been waiting for a story like this. We documented every violation with 24/7 monitoring, time-lapse cameras, and water samples. I issued formal rent notices for dock usage, backdated and substantial. My grandmother shared before and after photos that broke hearts. Sage prepared the media strategy. Cordelia grew desperate. A private investigator snooped around. My workshop was vandalized and then hit with fake safety violations. Rumors spread that I was dealing drugs and evading taxes. She even tried to stage an environmental spill near Ezra's gravesite to justify quarantining our property. But our cameras caught her people in the act, and real EPA agents arrived in time to witness the deliberate contamination. The pressure peaked when she tried to have me arrested on trumped-up charges during bridge construction. Deputies hauled me away in handcuffs, but Sage live-streamed the entire event. The video went viral, drawing federal attention. The charges collapsed when the FBI revealed the corruption behind them. Labor Day weekend arrived with perfect lake weather. 200 investors, officials, and media gathered at the resort pavilion for Cordelia's big announcement of a $10 million expansion. She stood at the podium in a designer suit, gesturing confidently toward architectural renderings, boasting about environmental stewardship and clear title. That's when I walked in, uninvited, carrying my great-grandfather's old leather briefcase. Winston, Marcus, Sage, and my grandmother followed. As Cordelia claimed the last obstacle to expansion had been removed, I stood and held up the 1952 deed. Actually, I said, my voice steady, there seems to be some confusion about property rights. The room fell silent. I explained that my family owned the mineral and water rights to the entire lake bed, where their docks, swimming areas, and septic discharge sat. Marcus projected 3 years of damning environmental data. Then the FBI agents entered and placed Cordelia under arrest for Clean Water Act violations, fraud, and conspiracy. I served formal notice. All operations on my property must cease within 48 hours. The entire meeting was live-streamed to hundreds of thousands of viewers. Investors panicked. Reporters scrambled. Cordelia was led away in handcuffs, still shouting about lawyers and misunderstandings. 6 months later, the resort is gone. The EPA shut it down, and the property was sold to pay restitution. Today, it stands as the Ezra Thorne Memorial Nature Center, a public preserve and educational facility dedicated to lake protection. The luxury suites are now research labs and classrooms. The docks host school groups studying ecology. The lake has healed dramatically. Fish populations have surged, water clarity has returned, and toxic algae blooms have vanished. My grandmother lived long enough to give tours and see justice done. Her last words, watching the sunset from the rebuilt bridge, were simple. Ezra would be proud. I expanded my workshop into a teaching space where young people learn traditional boat-building skills. The bridge my great-grandfather built now symbolizes resistance and resilience. We established the Ezra Thorne Environmental Foundation with part of the settlement money. It has already helped dozens of families fight HOA abuse and illegal developments across the country. Property rights, environmental protection, and community values are worth defending, even when the fight feels impossible. Sometimes the little guy really can win if he's willing to stand up, dig deep, and fight smart. The morning mist still rises off Clearwater Lake as I stand on that old bridge with a fresh cup of coffee. Loons call across the water. Fish glide, visible 20 feet down, and the cedar scent of my workshop drifts on the breeze. 3 generations of Thorns built this life. With the lake healing and the community stronger, I believe 3 more will follow. Some bridges are worth rebuilding. Some fights are worth having. And some victories deserve to be shared so others know they can fight back too.